Finally, Clemson Sports Talk has come back to Drive Time. Hello, everybody. Lawton Swan back in the saddle once again. It is the show that shakes the Southland, Clemson Sports Talk for you. Each and every afternoon, as you make your way around the great state of South Carolina and beyond, listening to us on fantastic radio stations like Fox Sports Radio 1400 the Midlands, heard around the world on the iHeart Radio application. Download it today. It is free. Our website, put the .com on it. Doggone it. That's ClemsonSportsTalk.com. Off of the heels of a weekend of college football. Oof. Am I excited about what we've got for you today on the program? Hour one, all hour one. He is the People's Champion. Lowell, the producer extraordinaire. What a kickoff to the college football season. Lowski, what is up?
Bada boom. Realist champs in the room. How you doing?
I'm good, man. So catch us up. Like, what's going on? It's been a while. I can't even tell you the last time you were on the program. You were like on the show for 4 consecutive years, like every day. So when was the last time you were on? Because I honestly don't remember. You know, I see a lot of guests a lot of weeks. You probably at least have some recollection of the last visit to the show that shakes the Southland.
I don't. I really don't. It was sometime last season. I can't remember exactly when it was, but it was at some point last year, right? I think right before football kicked off, just like we're doing now. So, yeah, it's been about a year, I think.
Well, and we're glad to have you back on. Obviously, this past weekend, some college football games, a couple of Atlantic Coast Conference games this weekend, though. Not ACC games, but twixt ACC members, I should say. Both Florida State and North Carolina did have games, both victorious this weekend. But some big games coming up this week, especially a week from today. It'll be your Clemson Tigers taking on the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets in Atlanta. And Lowell, I seem to recall a year, I think it was 2014 when you first joined the program where I said, Lowell, don't you go to Atlanta. Don't you go to Atlanta, because you had been to Athens and you had been to Florida State, and Clemson was 0-2 in games you attended, and you went to Atlanta and Cole Stout happened.
Well, if you'll recall, first it was Deshaun Watson happening before Cole Stout had to come in and take over in that game. But yeah, I was 0-3 on the road that year. Went to Georgia, went to Athens, lost that one to start the season. Went to Tallahassee. What's that?
As we said nearly a decade ago, you can't spell Lowell without 3 L's. So
went to Tallahassee. Clemson lost that one. That was the famous snap over the head of Deshaun Watson, and then the Chad Morris post game. That's just who we are on the goal line. And then, yeah, Georgia Tech in Atlanta, and couple of pick sixes in that one, and Georgia Tech kind of rolled Clemson up in that one too. So, yeah, that was not a good road stint for me. I've been much better since then, if we're being honest.
Well, and that's true, and I hope you're fortunate enough this year as you make your way up to South Bend, Indiana for that game in November. I know you got to be excited to see the Tigers and Notre Dame, but here we sit, right, Lowell, a 10-3 season a year ago. Obviously, for a lot of people, some serious disappointment in that regard. I mean, the expectations for Clemson had become, hey, you make it to the college football playoff or bust, so to speak. So give me some insight. I mean, where is your head as we move towards the kickoff coming up a week from today?
I would actually say last year, and I know a few people have said this too, I would say last year was one of Dabo Swinney's best coaching jobs in his career, right? Because not since 2010 has a Clemson team faced that much adversity in one season. And I mean, you can make the argument for 2014, but those were it was still a little different circumstances in that one, right? Clemson hadn't really gotten to the level. They were getting there, but not really to the level that you were used to seeing them at. And then you come into last year with, the heir apparent Trevor Lawrence, and you think plug and play. You're going to keep things rolling, and things just kind of fell apart. And for that team to bounce back and somehow get to 10 wins again, just by dealing with all the injuries and the early season losses and that kind of stuff, to rip off as many games in a row as they did, I think that speaks volumes about the coaching staff and the coaching job that they did last year. And, I think you have to take the positives from that. And I think you assume if everyone stays healthy, you don't have the same type of injuries that you had last year. The defense, especially if it stays healthy with all their pieces, it could be a pretty special year.
Lowell the Producer hanging out with us here on a program. Again, follow him on Twitter at Lowell CST. And Lowell, we should let people know that our plan is to have you on the program even more during the college football year. And heck, who knows, maybe in the basketball season and on through, kind of like we used to. Now that we've got the ability to pull this thing off a little bit remotely, I don't think it'll be an everyday affair, but excited to welcome you back in, man. I know a lot of people kind of missed our back and forth, so I'm excited about getting that, to the level that we expect it to be as we'll continue to get better and get all our settings tweaked up. But, it took me a while because I don't know how much you've followed what's been going on, but I had to get a new computer. I had to get a new setup, all kind of new, deals. And quite frankly, it's not as easy. Like, yes, I understand there are shows out there where a guy can just plug a microphone in and go. But this is a program. We got to send it to iHeart. We got to figure this out. We got to figure that out. It was like, it took me like 6-8 months to really wrap my head around how we were going to pull this off. And I'm starting, Lowell, to feel more comfortable. 803-450-0086. That is a text line and a phone line. And again, you can be a part of the program anytime, any place, anywhere on our website, ClemsonSportsTalk.com. Full coverage of your Tigers. And we don't just cover them, by the way, while they're at Clemson. We cover them in the NFL with our Tigers in the League article. We've got our articles on high school recruits coming up that Clemson's targeting. Luke Wentz still taking care of that on the recruiting front, and an exclusive interview coming up this week with Brandon Strozier for our Clemson Sports Talk subscribers, where right now $1 gets you 3 months of coverage. After that, it's $63.17 for 1 year. And Lowell, even though it's been 19 seasons since that 63-17 victory over South Carolina, doesn't that 63-17 price point just roll right off of the tongue, especially in the Midlands?
That's always a fun number. Anytime you get to throw that number out, it's always a good thing. So yeah, it sounds really good when you say it.
Yeah, it's the only positive of high gas prices is that you can target that number if you want to. So, all right, Lowell, let's talk back again about DJ for a second, because I know that's where the concern of Clemson Tiger Nation is. And let alone if I look at the results on articles on our website as of late, like we did one about Clemson pouring in to Cade Klubnik, and it got thousands of shares and it got, nearly 10,000 views. I mean, it was ridiculous. I feel like I could say, hey, Cade Klubnik learned a new magic trick, and people would share that. Everybody's so excited about him. I mean, is this going to be maybe the most difficult thing for DJ, just defending the pressure of everybody who wants to see Cade Klubnik?
The backup quarterback's always the most popular player on the team, right? Like that's how it always works in football. If you have a good backup quarterback, they're always the most popular player, because as soon as your starter struggles, everyone wants to see the backup come in. I think for DJ, and I don't know if the staff would ever admit this or anything like that, but I think a lot of what happened with DJ, the injuries to him aside and the injuries to the receiving core aside, I think he never got over that Georgia game in the opener. When you get hit, how many times did Georgia sack him? Like 8 times, 7, 8 times, something like that in the opener. Hit him a lot more than that. I just don't think mentally he ever got past that situation. And I don't think his confidence ever came back as the year went on. So I think that was the difference between the DJ that we saw in limited time the year before and full-time starter DJ. So if he gets that confidence back, we've seen what he can do, right? Like we watched him go up to South Bend and set the record for an opposing quarterback passing yards against the Fighting Irish. Like we watched that happen in real time. He was incredible in his 2 starts. And so the talent is there, the ability is there. We just need it to all come together and see if he's gotten over that mental block that I think he kind of experienced after that Georgia opener.
He is Lowell, the producer extraordinaire, hanging out with us here. We'll come back to him in just a second. 803-450-0086, text line, phone line. Again, be a part of the program anytime. And he's right. And look, that's what I would expect. Lowell's kind of the backup. If I'm out, I always lean on Lowell, right? So he's also a big fan of the second guy up. So Lowell, again, man, it is fun though, getting the gang back together again and having a chance to sit down and chat with you. So, I've already given my kind of over under kind of my predictions on the season as a whole. And I think, look, again, the expectations are high. Is this a team with a schedule that they can go, say, 12-0, Lowell? Do you buy into the potential of a 12-0 regular season for Clemson? Or at this point, for this team, in your mind, is that a pipe dream?
No, they absolutely can. And it's going to start on the defensive side of the ball, right? If you take what Georgia was last year with their defense and that defensive front, that team this year is Clemson with all the talent that they have coming back and the depth they have along that defensive line. And it's the depth that they have would be starting at any other school in the country. That's what's going to carry this team. And early on, you're trying to figure out the offense. The opening slate isn't that difficult, isn't too hard to navigate. Once you get to that, I was going to say Wake, but with Sam Hartman being out, that's going to be a little bit iffy for the Demon Deacons now.
And I want to stop you there. Isn't that strange? I mean, I understand like HIPAA and FERPA and all that stuff, but it is amazing. I tried to look the other day. I can't find anything that says what's happened to him, like what this non-football medical issue he's dealt with is. And I can't, in my brain, I can't rationalize like if it was a gallbladder or an appendix that wouldn't just come out.
Right. And I don't know that we're ever going to know. It's obviously something that they don't want to talk about, and something that he's going to have to handle on his own. And hopefully he gets back, because he's incredible. He's an incredible player for them. And, all indications off the field is he's an incredible kid. So I'm pretty upset that Clemson's not going to get to play him again, because I would have liked to see what Wake looked like at full strength after the great year that they had last year. I think it's going to be a little bit of a struggle for them now. So your first challenge really comes against NC State, and you get that one at home, right? And then that's a team that hadn't beat you since 2011, and you've kind of owned them, and then they gave you a little bit of a wake-up call on the road. So, that's one that they have circled, and that's one they're really going to be focused in on. And if you know anything about Dabo Swinney and these staffs, this staff and this team, when they have a revenge type of opportunity, they lock in pretty well and they game plan pretty well and get ready. So that would be one that I would expect them to have the quarterback situation figured out by then. And that's one that you would expect them to win at home. So outside of that Notre Dame game, what's left? What's left to stop you from going 12-0?
Yeah, I kind of said, look, I think 12-0 is a possibility. Obviously, I think 11-1, if you had to just kind of guess what's most likely to happen, is probably 11-1 with the trip up. Lowell, what's your bottom end, though? We've got about 5 minutes left here in the first segment of the program today. I mean, what's your bottom end for the Tigers? Is 8-4 on the docket, or is 9-3 the bottom, perhaps, of a 12-game regular season?
10-2. They haven't won less than 10 games since when? 2010? 2010, the last time they won less than 10 games in the season. So why would you set the expectation any lower than 10 wins?
Well, last year they regular season wins. Regular season.
Okay, that's
last
fine.
Year, 9-3 in the regular season. Won a bowl game at 10.
10-2. Still settled at 10-2.
Follow Lowell on Twitter.
Well, here's the question. What 3 losses do you see on that schedule?
Well, I don't know. I mean, Georgia Tech beat them last year at home.
Yeah.
Are you going to be in Atlanta?
I am not. I'm not going to be in Atlanta.
That one. Okay, so I can I can take that one off the list.
I guess you can call Notre Dame a loss because I will be there.
So there you go. 11-1. 803-450-0086. Text line, phone line. Lowell, the producer extraordinaire, hanging out with us. He's on Twitter at Lowell CST. So NC State, Lowell, let's go back to that one for a minute because I know that this is a league, the Atlantic Coast Conference, that the talk is all about quarterback play. And a lot of those conversations start with Devin Leary. They'll get a chance to beat Clemson 2 years in a row. Do you think that the carryover from that one, the focus and attention to detail that Clemson has will be too much for the Wolfpack?
Yeah, I already said that, but it took 2 overtimes, correct?
Yes.
2 overtimes for NC State to beat Clemson's worst team since 2014 at home. And now you're walking into a situation where it's like, hey, these guys beat you last year. You're going to let that happen again at your house? You're going to let them beat you 2 years in a row? The talent and look, Devin Leary is an incredible quarterback. That defensive line is going to be all over him in that game. Assuming everyone's healthy by that point,
right?
That defensive front is going to be all over him, especially losing a guy, Ike Ekwonu, off of their offensive line last year, who was incredible, who really owned that game. If you go back and watch his reps versus like Miles Murphy, he was owning that ball game. And so he's a great quarterback. I think they're going to have some problems in Death Valley.
Follow him on Twitter at Lowell CST. Finally, Lowell, on that schedule, we got a minute left. South Carolina, lots of exuberance around Spencer Rattler. It's kind of still an unknown, right? You got to admit, by November, that offense could be clicking, and maybe Rattler's one of the best players in the country. Do you give the Gamecocks a chance at all? At all?
Not at Clemson. That's a really tough ask. And the thing about Rattler is, while he's super talented, he struggled last year playing offense under one of the best offensive minds in the country, right? Against teams in the Big 12 who are not known for playing defense. And now he goes to, let's be honest, less offensive talent at South Carolina than he had at Oklahoma. Oklahoma's always loaded up on offensive talent. Better defenses in the SEC and what he will face against Clemson. It's going to be a little bit of a culture shock, I think, for him going from Oklahoma to South Carolina. Doesn't mean they won't get better. Doesn't mean they won't improve. And he's certainly the best quarterback that they've had in a while now. But yeah, I'd give them about a 5 to 10% chance of winning that game in November.
There he is. He is Lowell, the producer. 803-450-0086. We had a quick break. I'm going to find out what Lowell thinks of the news that came out of Columbia on Friday about Jadeveon Clowney right after this. Rolling along on a Monday afternoon, the show that shakes the Southland Clemson Sports Talk, and he is the producer extraordinaire of the program on Twitter at Lowell CST. He joins us from his palatial palace in the Low Country. Lowell, what do you think of the intro, the return video intro that we play for the people watching online? John in Archdale, North Carolina, told me last week it's too flashy for my program.
Too flashy for the program. Nothing too flashy for this hurry up, no huddle sports talk.
That's what I said. You can't get too flashy for this show. We're the nature boy Ric Flair of sports talk radio.
That's right. Alligator boots and all.
All right, Lowell, listen, let's talk about some other positions on this Clemson Tiger team, because I know, obviously this week for a lot of people, is all about game one again, Labor Day night, one night from today, one night from this very night, or 1 week from this very night, it'll be college football for the Clemson Tigers. So, Lowell, from that standpoint, the offensive line, we've heard great things about Blake Miller and his ability to play at right tackle. And I think the most significant part of that is the great things have not come from multiple people, yes, but I really to me, to be able to hear those things from Walker Parks, who I think is just a monster, I think says a lot about how good Blake Miller might actually be.
Yeah, it kind of gives you some Mitch Hyatt vibes, doesn't it? Talking about how good he was coming in as a freshman and how he was kind of ready to rock and roll from day one. And, Blake Miller wasn't really a day one thing, but as camp progressed, you started hearing more and more. And, hey, this guy might actually be pushing to start at right tackle. And lo and behold, it appears he's going to be he's going to be the starter at right tackle. And that just gives you so much more flexibility to work with your other pieces, right? You can move some of those guys around, and kind of helps you preserve some depth behind them so that, you can roll some other really good guys who might have been forced into action as a starter, maybe, who now get to kind of, practice and take their reps and come in when necessary. And so obviously this is a great thing for the coaching staff to have a guy who was ready from day one to come in and step into that starting role.
And then, of course, you've also now, that means obviously that you've got Walker Parks moving to the interior, where he's sort of a, just a real road grader, if you will. And obviously you feel a lot better about Will Putnam at center, having, some time under his belt as well. How much of an impact do you think a guy like Thomas Austin, I know it's just speculative, but kind of having I'm not saying this is nothing against Robbie Caldwell, but just a younger guy, a guy that played on the offensive line at Clemson, maybe relates a little bit better to these guys. Just from that standpoint, I mean, how big of an impact do you think Thomas Austin may have on this unit?
It's kind of sounding like he's already kind of shaping things his way. You hear about how he's able to relate to these guys and how he's able to explain things really well. And so it kind of feels like you're going to see, and I think you're going to see an improvement anyways off of last season. It was kind of like, how could you not get better from some of that play that you saw last year? But yeah, it feels like this is going to be a much improved unit up front for Clemson on offense. And obviously that will help open things up much more than last year in terms of play calling and that kind of stuff. But you've already seen the big impact he's had off of the field too, on the recruiting trail, with some of the wins that he's been able to get so far in recruiting. So overall, this seems like it's been a really great move promoting him to the offensive line coach.
The other thing too that this will probably affect, right, is the running backs. And this group, you hear some of the guys talk about them, and they say, hey, we think we've got one of the best running back rooms in America. And look, I don't know every running back room across the country, Lowell, by any means, but it sure does feel like, in terms of drop off from whoever ends up being the starter, most likely Will Shipley, to, Kobe Pace and Phil Maffa, probably that third option, that these guys are just a solid trio that you're really not going to see that step back, if you will, that a lot of times you can have.
And they're all kind of different guys, right? Like Will Shipley's more of the pass catcher guy who, kind of kill you with speed. Although we did see some power out of him last year too on some of those runs, but he's really more of the scat back type of guy. Phil Maffa just apparently is a truck based on what we saw from him in limited playing time last year. And Kobe Pace is kind of your in between guy. If he finds a hole and he busts it, he can take it to the house. But he's more of the get you 4 or 5 yards and keep the offense moving a little bit guy. So you've got 3 guys with kind of 3 different skill sets that you can roll in whatever the situation is, and that's got to be a really good feeling if you're Brandon Streeter trying to run this offense.
Again, follow him on Twitter at Lowell, CSTLOWELL. Remember, you can't spell Lowell without 3 L's. That one never is going to get old, Lowell. So I promised before the last break that I would ask you about the situation with Jadeveon Clowney at South Carolina. And I didn't pay that off here because Lola and I were doing some behind the scenes work on some audio stuff, and it actually slipped my mind before we got back from break. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to send Lowell to the backyard for a minute, to the backstage, and then we're going to come back. And this time, folks, I am going to pay off that question. It was announced on Friday that Jadeveon Clowney, and I know this is the show that shakes the Southland, and the name and lights of the purple and orange of Clemson Tiger Nation are emblazoned on the Midlands of South Carolina and the world through the iHeartRadio app. But I was befuddled that Jadeveon Clowney would get his jersey retired before a couple of other big-name Gamecocks. We'll see what Lowell has to say about that move when we get back right here on the Monday edition of the show that shakes the Southland. Keep it locked for more Clemson Sports Talk on Fox Sports Radio 1400 and on the iHeartRadio app. Clemson Sports Talk on a Monday afternoon. Lawton Swan, Lowell the producer, hanging out with us. Look, here's what I said on Friday when the news broke that Jadeveon Clowney, that his number 7 jersey was going to be retired by the South Carolina Gamecocks. Well, the South Carolina Gamecocks announced earlier today, for all our fine feathered friends peeking over the fence, that they will be retiring number 7 in honor of Jadeveon Clowney. Clowney, who the back end of his tenure was hampered by knee injuries and sitting out, unfortunately for South Carolina fans. I wouldn't say, listen, you come at me if you want to, but if you really believe that guy gave you everything he had in his final season, please. Nonetheless, his number 7 jersey is going to be retired. Clowney, of course, from Rock Hill, was the top recruit in 2011, picking South Carolina over Clemson on Valentine's Day. He was also the number 1 pick in the NFL draft by the Houston Texans. He's been with the Cleveland Browns, now a teammate of Deshaun Watson there in Cleveland. He is, I think, still one of the most talented players I've ever seen coming out of high school. Just the gifts that he possessed on the defensive line, speed, power, size. I don't know that they've ever made a more prototypical player than Jadeveon Clowney, quite frankly. And had his knees, had he not had to have microfracture surgery, had that not happened, I think he would have probably been somebody we'd still be talking about in the NFL as being an elite player, and he has elite moments. James says, man, he took his final season off. You can't retire that number. Not only, James, are they retiring it, he is the first player to have this jersey retired at South Carolina since Sterling Sharp in 1987. So, Lowell, I'll ask you, and again, you got to hear the audio there, the first guy to have his jersey retired since Sterling Sharp. I said later on in that clip, and if you missed any of it, you can go back and get the podcast. But I said in that clip on Friday, I just, it's not my university, it's not my business. But can you explain to me how Jadeveon Clowney's jersey would be retired before, say, I don't know, Marcus Lattimore, Connor Shaw? Help me out, Lowell.
I would kind of look at it from this perspective. And I don't know what their thought process is behind it. I don't know if it was me making the decision that I would retire his jersey, but let's kind of look at why they would, right? The talent on the field aside, and we can even, this is Clemson sports side, we can even tie it back to Clemson. I'll kind of make a comparison here.
Okay.
That was kind of like when Clemson managed to pull CJ Spiller, right? When Clemson managed to pull CJ Spiller away from Florida State and Florida and every other top school in the country to come to Clemson, right? Like that was their CJ Spiller. They got the number one recruit in the country to come to South Carolina, and he came to South Carolina, and just to be able to say, hey, these are the kind of guys that we're bringing in now. This is a new era of South Carolina football, right? And that's kind of when they started going on their big run, and they started winning 11 games in a season and winning bowl games and kind of making an impact in recruiting. And their recruiting got much better after they managed to pull in Jadeveon Clowney, because players want to play with the best players, right? So if you manage to get a really good player, a number one recruit in the country, other recruits are going to follow in. So I would say he kind of helped kick off a really, really good stretch of football for South Carolina. And his commitment alone, I don't know that you can really quantify that the way it needs to be quantified, because that was such a big get for them to be able to go on a really big run.
It's interesting too, and I don't know the particulars about Clowney's academic career or Connor Shaw's academic career or Marcus Lattimore. And again, I want to make note here for the Gamecocks who are hanging out with us today that there have been many other great players since Sterling Sharp that have come through that program who may have deserved the honor of having their jersey retired, right? But I don't pretend to be an expert when it comes down to legendary or great South Carolina Gamecocks. But maybe Clowney, and I don't know this, but maybe Clowney is the only one of those three that's graduated. And Clemson has some rules that, you can't get into certain things like the Ring of Honor without having graduated. So, I mean, maybe that's the difference there, but I find it hard to believe that Gamecock fans, when they heard that, weren't thinking, hold up, what about some of these other great names that we've had through the years since Sterling Sharp that have not had that kind of honor bestowed upon them? I found it to be funny, but I did enjoy Clowney. I mean, do you agree with my take? I mean, is he the most prototypical defensive end you ever seen coming out of high school? I still think he's right there for me.
Absolute monster. You're talking about a guy who's 6'7", 250 something, 260 something pounds, fast as all get out. I mean, you go watch his 40-yard dash before the NFL draft, and
ridiculous.
That is a guy, and you see this from time to time with guys who are super gifted and super talented who never really hit their full potential or turn into what you thought they would be at the next level, because they didn't have to work that hard to get there, right? Like Clowney walked out of high school and was ready to dominate college football from day one. Like he really didn't have to try very hard at the college level. And so, you get those guys who were just super ultra dominating. And then, when it's time to put the work in at the next level, they haven't really built the habits up to do that. So that kind of what it feels like happened to Clowney in the NFL. And he's still hanging around the NFL. He's still playing, but it feels like he could have been more than what he's turned out to be.
The show that shakes the Southland here. One final segment coming up with our buddy Lowell, the producer extraordinaire, hanging out with us. Going to kick him to the backdrop for a minute. We'll come back. We'll put a big old bow on our number one. Stay with us. Final segment of hour number one. Coming up, William Qualkenbush on the show that shakes the Southland. But no. Oh, I already got his name up. I left his name up because he is the producer extraordinaire, and he is in the building hanging out with us. Lowell, so with your schedule, I mean, I know it's all over the place, but give our listeners a chance to know, like, roughly how many times a week might we be able to get you on, depending on the week, obviously.
Yeah, it depends on the week, but you may have me a maximum of 3 days. Like it, that may be something that turns out to be realistic with my given schedule. So yeah, it's a lot more flexible than the old job. So I'm feeling pretty confident that I'll be around a little bit more this football season.
Again, and Lowell's also going to be doing some writing for us as well during football season on the website. Again, put the .com on it. Doggone it, that's ClemsonSportsTalk.com. Lowell, we spent a lot of the time here in hour number one before we did that Clowney segment, obviously talking about the Clemson Tiger offense. You mentioned how good you thought this defense was going to be out of the gates, and I don't think anybody is denying that defensive front and how good those guys might be. But the second and third level are where maybe some people have some questions, some concerns or whatever. I think that what we've seen from Trenton Simpson's move to the weak side linebacker and Barrett Carter's ability to play in the way that Wes Goodwin wants to run it. I'll be honest, I think that those two guys are almost interchangeable, and I don't think Clemson's going to have to flip-flop the field a whole lot when they get maybe some different looks. Like, I can see where those two guys just sort of maneuver what they do for this team defensively. What are your thoughts on, the back end specifically of Clemson's defense in 2022?
Well, I would answer that with a question. Would you rather have questions along your defensive line, or would you rather have questions in the secondary?
Oh, secondary.
Yeah. And you know why? Because you can have the best secondary in the world, and if your defensive front can't get any pressure, they're going to wear down, and they're going to, teams are going to start finding openings and hitting you deep and hitting you short and, having all day back in the pocket. But if you only have 1.5 seconds as soon as you take the snap, because that big defensive line's coming down on you, that's going to help an inexperienced secondary out. So Clemson's going to have one of, if not the best defensive line in the country next season. So that's going to help out a lot with the young linebackers and the young secondary, because they're coming. They're going to start getting pressure, and they're going to rack up sacks, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch that defense next year. So I worry less about having questions in the secondary, and you know what kind of talent you have at the linebacker spot. So,
and you said next year, you mean next week.
Next week, yes.
Okay.
I forget that we're right around the corner from football season here, but yes, next week you're going to see how good that defensive front is for Clemson, and so that is certainly going to give any questions that you have in the secondary. It's going to give those guys a lot of time to evolve and get better as the year goes on. And the defensive front is going to make them look a lot better than maybe they might be if you didn't have, the type of pressure that I think you're going to get from those guys up front.
Are you surprised, Lowell, at the confidence that exists when it comes down to Wes Goodwin? I mean, look, being a play caller is not just, this is not, hey, Wes, thanks for joining us. This is how we file these papers in alphabetical order. He's going to be going up against some great offensive minds. That's a tall task, I think, for a guy in year one. Everything I hear, everybody makes it sound like, hey, it's going to be good to go. But this is not a simple job he's taking on.
Well, I think the fact that he was involved in the game planning, right? I think that helps people have a lot more confidence. Like it wasn't he's just sitting there taking notes during meetings or whatever. Like he's actively involved in crafting a defense to face a specific team from week to week with Brent Venables. So I think that's where that confidence comes from. That number one, he's evidently super smart. And number two, he has been involved for a while now with the actual process of coming up with a game plan for these guys. So no, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all by that.
Again, you can follow Lowell on Twitter at Lowell CST. Lowell, we got about 2 minutes left. Real quick, the secondary, you mentioned the fact that that defensive front should help them out. Nate Wiggins is getting a lot of headlines. I mean, is this going to be a type of secondary group because of that defensive front that you foresee, forcing a lot of turnovers and doing some of those things that you got to do, in order to really benefit an offense that last year was sort of stagnant?
Oh, absolutely. And you will get more, I guess you can kind of call them like panic turnovers from quarterbacks, right? Like they get the snap and here comes Miles Murphy or Brian Brzee bearing down on you, and you got to get the ball out quick, and you throw it quick, and now you have your cornerbacks who have been in the past under Mike Reed super aggressive, right? Like they're very physical and they're super aggressive trying to get after the ball. And so you will have multiple pick sixes next year. I will say that. Like the defensive touchdown isn't something that Clemson has gotten in the past a lot. Yeah. I think you're going to have a lot of panic turnovers from offenses next year that will turn into touchdowns. That's what Georgia was so good at, right? Last year and the past couple of years, Georgia's been incredible at getting defensive touchdowns. Georgia and Alabama specifically have been very good at forcing turnovers and turning those directly into points. I think Clemson's going to be very good at doing that next year or next week. I said next year again, next week.
Follow him on Twitter at Lowell CST. Lowell, buddy, we'll talk to you tomorrow, man. Thanks for hanging out.
Yes, sir. We'll see you.
All right, there he is, Lowell the Producer. With a break, hour 2, we come back. William Qualkenbush steps into the arena to go 1-on-1 with the great one. Stay with us.